Power rarely announces itself. It embeds, seeps, and normalizes. It turns extraordinary advantage into ordinary procedure until domination reads like common sense and obedience feels like civility. Behind every polished institution sits a set of mechanics designed to perpetuate advantage. Laws, norms, incentives, all are tuned to reproduce privilege, rarely in plain sight but always with ruthless efficiency. The dirty game of power is layering. Layer law over custom, custom over habit, habit over fear. Each overlay conceals the one beneath it until the architecture of dominance becomes invisible even to those who live inside it. Money is not the sole engine. Narratives are. Whoever controls the story defines the boundaries of possibility. Control the tale and you control what people will accept as real, moral, and inevitable. Elites do not merely win fights, they shape the battlefield. They introduce rules, penalty structures, and scoring systems that favor their play style and call it a fair game, because everyone can technically participate. Co-optation is a favorite tactic. Bring potential threats inside the tent, give them status, and convert dissent into management. The rebel becomes a stakeholder. His voice quiets under the weight of perks. Institutions are curatorial machines. Boards, panels, editorial lines, grant committees. These gatekeepers decide which questions are allowed and which are starved into silence. Curated attention becomes curated outcomes. Power invests in legitimacy. It funds research, prestige, awards, and conferences that validate its choices. Legitimacy is sold back to the public as neutral expertise when it's often paid consensus. Divide and rule is not chaotic, it is surgical. Create cleavages, amplify grievances selectively, and let communities exhaust themselves fighting each other while the architects of control remain untouched. Conflict becomes a firewall. Surveillance is the new infrastructure of certainty. Not just cameras, but data, credit scores, behavioral models, all designed to predict, incentivize, and penalize deviation before it translates into disorder. Predictability is the currency of control. Law and emergency powers are routinely weaponized as tools of permanence. Temporary measures introduced during panic rarely disappear. They calcify into new norms that embed authority deeper into daily life. Propaganda now wears many faces: PR, metrics, algorithmic boosts, viral memes. Influence is industrialized. The production of consent is a quiet factory where clicks translate into compliance. Institutions recruit pliability through aspirational ladders, internships, fellowships that lead to board seats. Ambition becomes the steam that powers the machine. Climb, and you conserve the structure that lifted you. Markets are molded to serve power's reproduction. Regulatory capture, lobbying, and financial engineering reroute public value into private advantage. Efficiency becomes a veneer masking extraction. Expertise is monopolized. Gatekeepers create credential barriers and epistemic norms that define who counts as knowing. Dissenting knowledges are marginalized as noise or worse, as dangerous misinformation. Cultural soft power matters as much as coercion. Festivals, awards, and institutions of taste set the coordinates of acceptable imagination. When culture tolerates only certain stories, alternatives collapse quietly. Networks are consolidated. Public-private partnerships, consortiums, and revolving doors make accountability porous. Power moves through networks that are legible to insiders and opaque to publics. Opacity is protection. Education is retooled to reproduce, not to revolt. Curricula groom competencies useful to existing systems. Critical inquiry is tolerated only within bounds that preserve operational stability. Inquiry becomes safe when it asks no systemic questions. Criminalization is selective. Laws proliferate that police the behavior of the vulnerable while protecting the practices of the powerful behind legalistic shields. Justice becomes a mechanism of management, not equal remedy. Media consolidation shrinks the field of inquiry. Fewer owners, fewer lines of inquiry, more coordinated messaging. Information ecosystems are pruned until dissent is quarantined and surprise is minimized. Symbolic power is underestimated at peril. Flags, rituals, and ceremonies naturalize authority. Repetition turns symbolism into unquestioned allegiance. Ritual is the glue that keeps social hierarchies legible. Philanthropy is a clever instrument. Donate, set agendas, shape research questions, and brand your extraction as benevolence. Influence traded as charity obscures who benefits and who pays the price. Crisis management is a rehearsal. Each emergency trains population and institutions to accept rapid, centralized solutions that later become routine. Habituation to emergency is a method of accretion for power. Power uses complexity as a shield. When systems are intricate, publics give up on scrutiny and defer to experts who often have conflicts of interest. Complexity paralyzes popular oversight and invites technocratic rule. Gatekeeping of resources, capital, information, reputation, concentrates capacity. When access is scarce and controlled, obedience becomes the rational strategy for survival and advancement. Scarcity manufactures compliance. The state and private capital form compacts of convenience. Mutual backstops, subsidies, bailouts, favorable contracts ensure that failure of dominant actors is not catastrophic for the system that benefits from them. Risk is socialized. Reward privatized. Histories are rewritten or obscured to validate present orders. The official archive excludes inconvenient truths. Collective memory is curated in ways that naturalize current hierarchies and delegitimize rebellion. Memory becomes policy. Control adapts by learning. Systems monitor responses, iterate tactics, and refine methods. Power is not static. It is an evolving strategy that learns from resistance and co-opts its adversary's best moves. Adaptation is survival. Resistance itself is disciplined. Covert repression, legal maneuvers, and reputational warfare neutralize opponents without creating martyrs. When defeat is quiet and reputational, movements fracture before they consolidate. And finally, the most corrosive mechanism: consent manufactured as choice. When people feel they chose a system, they defend it. Choice is engineered to feel real while designed outcomes remain predictable. Participation as consent, participation as governance. If you can name these instruments, you disarm part of their power. Seeing the mechanics turns inevitability into contingency. What looked like destiny becomes a set of engineered decisions that can be unmade. But naming is only the first step. Mapping the players, funding flows, norms, and incentives is how you convert critique into strategy. Power is durable because its architecture is uncharted by the many. Chart it, and you create leverage. Awareness forces a choice. Accept the rules written for you, or begin the labor of redesigning them. The first half of the dirty game is concealment. The second half is habituation. Both can be reversed if enough minds refuse to accept normalcy. The game of power has never been about fairness. It has always been about control. Those at the top design systems where rules apply differently depending on who you are. For the powerful, laws are flexible, loopholes are tools, and consequences are negotiable. For everyone else, rules are chains meant to keep them in place. This imbalance is not an accident. It is the very essence of the dirty game. When you look closely, you realize that the structure of society works like a giant pyramid. At the bottom are the masses, carrying the weight of production, labor, and taxes. Above them, a smaller group reaps the rewards of that effort, making decisions that shape the entire pyramid. At the very top sits an elite class that benefits disproportionately, ensuring that the pyramid never collapses because they designed it to rest firmly on the backs of everyone else. This pyramid is disguised as opportunity. You are told that if you work hard, you can climb upward, but the climb is steep and the rungs of the ladder are deliberately broken for most. The idea of mobility is sold like a dream, but the reality is closer to a trap. Few ever escape the bottom, and those who do often find that the price of entry into higher circles is submission to the very system they thought they were overcoming. Another way power sustains itself is through the manipulation of language. Words are weapons. Consider how terms like progress, freedom, or security are used. On the surface, they sound noble and righteous, but when deployed by those in control, they often mask surveillance, inequality, and restrictions. Language becomes a smokescreen, convincing people that oppression is actually protection, and that control is actually freedom. History shows us that power always wears a mask. Kings called it divine right. Dictators called it revolution. Democracies call it representation. But beneath the costume, the same dynamics are at play. A small group commands, the majority obeys. The labels change, but the mechanics of dominance remain consistent. The dirty game thrives on its ability to reinvent its appearance while never truly altering its function. The illusion of choice is one of the dirtiest tricks. People believe they are free because they can choose between options, but often both choices serve the same master. In politics, you vote for leaders who promise different futures, yet both operate within the same framework designed to preserve elite power. In consumption, you pick brands that seem different, but they are owned by the same corporations. The game is not about freedom of choice. It is about control of the options. Technology has supercharged this game. Every click, every like, every movement is tracked. Data has become the new currency of power. With it, those in control can predict behavior, influence decisions, and steer populations without them realizing it. The digital cage doesn't need bars, it needs only algorithms that shape thought invisibly. What feels like convenience is actually surveillance dressed as innovation. One of the cruelest tactics is distraction. While people argue over cultural battles or focus on celebrity scandals, the machinery of power continues unchecked. The noise is deliberate, a way to keep attention fixed on surface issues while deeper systems of control remain invisible. Bread and circuses weren't just tools of Rome. They are alive and thriving in every corner of the modern world. Fear, too, is essential. Power thrives when people are afraid. Afraid of losing jobs, afraid of disease, afraid of war, afraid of each other. Fear paralyzes, making populations easier to manage. It creates dependency, because in fear, people beg for protection. And the ones offering that protection are the very architects of the fear in the first place. It is a cycle deliberately engineered. Education, ironically, is another weapon. While it is supposed to liberate, in reality, it is designed to standardize. Schools often teach obedience, not critical thinking. They condition people to memorize rather than to question, to follow rather than to rebel. By shaping minds early, power ensures future generations will not challenge the system, but instead uphold it without ever realizing they are doing so. Religion has been used in similar ways. While faith can be deeply personal, institutions often transform it into a system of control. Promises of salvation or threats of damnation keep populations obedient. Aligning spiritual belief with political agendas is one of the oldest tricks in the book, and it remains devastatingly effective today. Economics is perhaps the most visible weapon of all. Debt is the modern chain, binding millions into lives of endless work. Interest ensures that most people can never escape, keeping them enslaved to banks and corporations. Meanwhile, wealth accumulates in the hands of a few, creating gaps so vast they become unbridgeable. The game is not designed for balance, it is designed for dependency. What makes this dirty game almost invincible is that it convinces people to defend it. Many victims of the system protect it fiercely, believing it benefits them. They fight for the rules, enforce them on others, and mock those who resist. This is the genius of manipulation. When the oppressed enforce their own oppression, the controllers barely need to lift a hand. Propaganda is the bloodstream of power. From childhood to adulthood, media saturates people with narratives that define what is normal, acceptable, or possible. The repetition of slogans, images, and ideas builds a cage around the mind. Once you believe the story, you don't even see the bars anymore. You accept them as reality. That is how control becomes invisible. Even resistance is anticipated. The system thrives by absorbing opposition. Movements that begin as genuine challenges to power are often co-opted, redirected, or commodified. Once they are commercialized, they lose their revolutionary energy and become just another product to sell. The system does not always crush resistance. Often, it consumes it. But here lies the paradox. While the game feels unbreakable, history proves it can be disrupted. Empires have fallen, revolutions have erupted, and systems thought eternal have crumbled. Power is not invincible. It is only as strong as the belief that sustains it. The moment enough people see the strings, the puppet show ends. Yet, awareness alone is not enough. Many see the game, but feel powerless to act. This despair is another weapon used by those in control. Hopelessness paralyzes as effectively as fear. But the truth is, even the smallest acts of refusal chip away at the structure. Choosing to question, choosing to resist, choosing to think freely, these are seeds of collapse for the dirty game. Every generation has a chance to break the cycle, but most let it pass, lulled by distractions, softened by comfort, or beaten down by fear. The question is not whether power will continue to play its dirty game. It will. The question is whether people will continue to play along. That decision, though hidden beneath layers of manipulation, still belongs to us. The greatest threat to power is not rebellion, but awakening. When enough minds refuse to accept the illusions, when enough voices dare to speak, the pyramid begins to shake. Power does not collapse from violence alone, it collapses from disbelief. The moment the masses stop believing in the game, the rules lose their magic. And so, you are left with a choice. Do you continue living as a pawn in a game you didn't choose, or do you begin to step outside its illusions? Do you accept the chains as natural, or do you question why they were placed there at all? The dirty game thrives in silence. Breaking it begins with a single word: no. If you have stayed with me until this point, it means you already feel the weight of these truths. You know the game is real, and you know it is rotten. The question is not whether the game exists. The question is whether you will remain a spectator or become a player who refuses the rules. Power wants you docile, unquestioning, and asleep. But the fact that you are here, listening, means you are waking up, and awakening is the greatest threat they fear. The pyramid trembles when minds begin to open. The system cracks when illusions fade. The game can only continue if you allow it. You are not powerless. You are not voiceless. Every thought you free from their control weakens the structure. Every time you refuse to accept their illusions, the dirty game loses strength. The future is not written in their hands. It is shaped by those who dare to see through the lies. So, do not remain silent. Do not let fear or hopelessness paralyze you. Speak, think, and act in ways that break the rules of their illusion. Even the smallest spark can ignite a fire when it spreads. And power, no matter how dirty its tricks, cannot withstand a fire that refuses to die. Now is the time to decide which side of history you stand on. Do you remain a pawn, or do you choose to break free from their game? Do you accept their illusions, or do you step into truth? The choice has always been yours, even if they tried to make you forget it. If you are ready to stop being manipulated, if you are ready to see the game for what it is, then do not walk away in silence. Stay with us. Subscribe to this channel and join those who refuse to live as prisoners of deception. The dirty game wants you blind, but together we will expose it. Subscribe now. because the more who awaken, the faster their system falls.